today. We've done a little bit of welcome and overview and introduction. We want to give you a summary of the signature project itself. Then we want to pause and really hear from you your first impressions and feedback on what we have delivered up to that point. We do want to, in the hour that we have, give you some highlight notes about the timeline, budget, and sort of next steps. And in between, as I mentioned before, a second round of us just really listening to you in terms of your impressions and feedback for what it means for the zone, but also what it might mean for you at the district and club level. So, So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Anna. We'd like to make a big point about partnerships in general, and I've already used that word, but I'd like to invite Anna in to tell us a little bit more.
So when we were thinking about this project, we looked at some of the most incredible sort of goals that Rotary has taken on and worked toward and made huge impact on, including some of those that are here, the water, sanitation, hygiene, the Rotary action groups that have been created, the incredible partnership with Shelter Box, which I think started with one club in Cornwall, England, and has resulted in over 1 million shelters being offered to people, migrants, immigrants, and those in situations of natural disaster who find themselves in need of temporary shelter. And of course, the 10 million meal challenge, which I think many of you will be familiar with, which partnered with food banks across zones and states in your zones. And so this idea of Rotary taking on huge projects, big ambitious ideas, and partnering, focusing on sort of local partners that then have a capacity to scale it up, is very familiar, I think, in the Rotary community. And this is what Rotary is exciting, and this is what Rotary is about in many ways, is that individuals can come together in their communities, in their states, on their district levels, on their regional levels, and on a global level to take on major challenges. And in this case, the challenge we are interested in taking on is peace and conflict prevention and resolution, which is now one of Rotary International's 6 areas of focus. We can move it to the next slide. So Rotary and peace building and peace have a long history together. We've put some of the highlights here on this slide, but has been very involved with the UN and the UN's founding as a place where countries can come together and talk about the big issues that confound the world. We now have a very robust Rotary International representative network where there are Rotarians who volunteer to represent the organization at multilateral organizations around the world. I have just joined that. I have to say it's incredibly impressive to see these Rotarians at everything, particularly in this moment, like the World Health Organization, the UN Environmental Program, the Commonwealth, so a number of multilateral organizations across the world. We also have the Peace Fellows, of course, a signature program of Rotary. I think there's now 1,500 Rotary Peace Fellows, and they just put on a major cyber conference for peace in June, which attracted 2,000 people, joined across a 24-hour time span. The Rotary Peace Academy has been developed in relationship with the Institute for Economics and Peace, and now there is the possibility for Rotary clubs to become peace builder clubs. I call this the Rotary's ecosystem for peace. Many of these are small efforts that started with one club or with the Rotary Action Group for Peace, and then have expanded to include a much bigger group to become something that Rotarians around the world are interested in being a part of. And all of that is really founded on Rotary's idea of, or foundation for understanding peace, and a model that we call the positive peace model. And you see this here. This is a model that's forwarded by the Institute of Economics and Peace, and it is established in over 10 years of data in their Peace Index. And you see here these 8 different parts of what peace is made up of, including a well-functioning government and high levels of human capital, which basically means literacy. And you can also see, as you look at these 8 different areas, how closely they are to many of Rotary's signature or priority areas of focus. We believe that peace education can be something that Rotarians can focus on community levels, on local levels, but then can build on these global approaches and global models and do this together. Oh, Patricia,
you're muted.
Yes, trying to be super quiet. So as you can see at the end of the last slide that Anna was speaking over, there was a wonderful little quote that basically said, peace education could be our sweet spot at Rotary. And we owe credit for that to Peter Kyle, because as he wrote to you in asking you to participate in these discussions, it was about 2 years ago that he really began to think about what could be a signature project that he would focus on during his tenure. And I remember being in that meeting, and he said, you know, you can't own peace. You can't even own peace building, and certainly not as one organization, Rotary. But what there is a clear track record around with Rotary is being an educator and a convener and a communicator with regard to peace, whether it was in the early 20th century or today. And when Anna mentions the 1,500 Rotary Peace Fellows that now exist, they exist at the university, master's degree, and or professional level. But there is actually all kinds of research that says the missing is bringing peace education to the community level so that civic leaders and influencers, as well as young people invited into the process, can make a difference to peace at the community level. So we always like to emphasize that this conversation about scaling within zones 33, 34 is the idea that there is an incredible role for Rotarians to play as voices for peace and peace education in the community. And we have to keep young people at the center of all of our conversations. Why? Because there are 1.8 billion, well, there are 3 billion young people on the planet who are under age 25. There are 1.8 billion between the ages of 15 and 24. It's the fastest growing demographic on the planet. And there's all kinds of research that says, if we miss this window when this demographic is so big and so influential, it will be unfortunate 10 or 15 years down the road. Now in the United States, we only have about 12% of students who are in that, or young people who are in that age group of 15 to 24. Whereas if you live in Ethiopia, 80% of the population is under the age of 30. 70% of the population is under the age of 30 in South Sudan. But these young people in the United States have many assets that others around the world don't have. They generally have access to education. They have access to technology. They're called on in many cases to do service, to be considered seriously for university and college paths. And most importantly, as we're seeing in the news day in and day out, there is an awakening and vivid sense of wanting to be involved in matters of racial and social justice. They are aware of what they consider a deep or deepening divide around issues related to the environment, social justice, gun violence, and there's all kinds of new research that says they are looking for a way post-COVID-19 to be engaged and be influential. And in some ways they feel that they have been contained and not able to go out and be the positive force that they want to be. So the proposition from Peter is there's a history of peace education writ large and done well in Rotary. Why not be the groups who are involved at the community level to bring these capabilities to the community level? So you would have seen this on an infographic that we sent out, or that Peter sent out before, and we have followed up with, but there's a little more detail here, because in the infographic that was sent out, the idea that in a year you could touch 100,000 people, and primarily young people, and equip them to actually be harbingers of peace, effective peace project leaders, is pretty bold. But you want to do the math. right? So how could that actually work? So we've added some more detail this morning to show you that the idea that's put forth is that in bringing peace education to the local community level or district level, there are really sort of 4 elements that we can work with. One is immersive training experiences that involve Rotarians and civic leaders and leaders of organizations involved with young people that set a context and understanding for some of what Anna was talking about before. Positive peace, the pillars of positive peace, the way we actually look at issues in our community and use a particular framework or lens to go to work collectively on addressing some of those issues. So that's the training events portion. Then there's a schools focused portion of the signature project that really has 2 parts. One is to bring peace education certification to service club leaders with Interact at the center, but I want to add to that here in a moment and say it's a little bit more than Interact, and we'll tell you why. Also, there's an opportunity to bring peace education into the classroom, make it available to teachers teaching certain kinds of subjects who actually are eager to receive that sort of content. And I want to share with you, I shared this morning, there's actually a bill being put forth in the state of Illinois right now to eliminate US history instruction from our high schools. And the premise is we're not teaching it right or well enough, so just eliminate it. You can imagine that Anna and Elizabeth and Alicia and I this morning went, well, that's a crazy idea. Yeah, we can do better than that. We can support peace education coming along particular topics. And again, Rotary can be a platform. And then last but not least, a recognition that Rotary at the local level has a tremendous capacity in terms of education and literacy. The possibility that in this signature project, for some districts, some locales, some cities, some clubs, it might make sense to leverage the education and literacy experience they have, but during the signature project year, put a focus on books and readings about peace. Now, the numbers, we say the goal is 100,000, touching 100,000 young people or engaging 100,000 young people. As you can see, we've been doing a lot of math behind the background, and we have been able to see how in a year, it's possible to equip more than 2,000 Rotarians and civic leaders and leaders of youth organizations with these training experiences, setting a context for why peace education is so important. With the Peace Builder certifications and peace education curricula that we have available to us, and it just needs to be brought forth on a larger scale, it's possible to actually reach, in the matter of a year, just in our zones, 17,000 high school students in service clubs. I do want to point out that little notation that says we have looked very carefully at how many interactors there are in the United States and the zones, and we have looked at how many key club members there are, how many Model UN participants you typically have in the United States. And we want Interact to be at the center of this effort, but just focusing on Interact will not reach all service club leaders. So there's an opportunity for Rotary to put forth this opportunity to interact and more. We have seen that with curricula it's already available and further being developed around US history and peace building, environmental sustainability and peace building, which by the way, environmental sustainability, new focus area for Rotary, could be available to 1,000 high school teachers and therefore 75,000 high school students initially as a starting point. You know, it can be grown from there. And then last we said, well, and if you add in books, suddenly your math takes you over 100,000 recipients. We do want to emphasize that we've been very conservative in these estimates, not overly ambitious at all, and so feel quite enthusiastic about how we could get there. Yeah, and so one of the questions that of course comes up is, well, but how do you get to that many people in that span of time? So for over 2 years, there's been some really important work going on in how you actually make Peace Builder certifications and peace education content available in experiential ways that allow you to take a lot of experience and a lot of content to a lot of students and communities for a relatively low cost. And so what you see here is just a visual example of a learning platform that would help us get that peace education certification and educational content to schools, but also support the efforts of getting content to Rotarians. I say this has been underway for 2 years, and that is true. And it is part of the secret to being able to scale experiences and scale content. I mentioned those funders up front, those partner funders that we're already having great conversations with, Microsoft, Rappaport, the Alliance for Peace Building, the Democracy Fund. This is part of their excitement in terms of coming alongside Rotary, if Rotary is there at the district level and the club level to create energy and excitement at the community level. So that is not a financial responsibility of Rotary. All right, and so I just quickly, obviously the books was not the biggest portion of what our team is here sharing with you this morning, but we do want to note that already Rotary has so many partnerships around education and literacy that there are some interesting ways that books and or readings about peace could be available and available to families. And this is just a list of some of the partners who already exist with Rotary. One Book for Life, Speaking Books, the International Reading Association, Save the Children. And there are some Rotarians who would love to see a partnership, a further partnership with the Imagination Library, which is actually Dolly Parton's organization that sends books into homes, 1 book a month. And so there's lots of opportunity there that already exists in terms of partnerships. All right, so now I'd like to turn it back to Anna, who can really give you some more detail on what are these adult-driven training events that we're talking about, because that's a particular construct within the project. Anna?
Yeah, thank you so much. And then we will turn it over and get some feedback from you guys. I want to make sure we focus on this as a listening exercise as well. But with the training events, we're really looking at these as Rotarians, as bridge builders and conveners in their communities. We currently propose these as 3-day experiences, really establishing a foundation for Rotary's work with the Positive Peace model, as well as their connection with the Peace Academy, and building on the work of Outward Bound Peace Building and New Gen Peace Builders. We have all done some examples of these with Rotaries around the world, so this builds on some of those ideas. At the moment, we're considering multiple scenarios, given this extraordinary moment the world is living in. We, of course, have to look at a COVID-19. We are looking at sort of a hybrid virtual, but also an in-person. I think we all know and probably yearn for more an opportunity to come together as communities. We missed the big Rotary conference this year and others, and we know the benefit of having these opportunities to form relationships and partnerships in person. It's just an in-person event is very difficult to substitute for in terms of those kinds of connections. However, we're getting better at it, and given the health scenarios and that we for the end of 2020 and 2021, we do have to think about these hybrid ideas. We're really focused on the idea of 21 events because it's 2021 and it's also the anniversary of the year of International Day of Peace. And so it's exciting to think about connecting all those ideas and doing 21 events, starting with some pilot events early part of the year of 2021, and we'll get more into that in terms of the timeline, and then moving forward with that. These would be, as you can see, the 3 different examples there, so I won't go through them, as well as a price, an estimated price. We have gone through these budgets, and you can see that the important thing here is how we can scale it. So it's really important to think about developing the tools, the workshops, the trainings, etc., and then thinking about how we scale it over zones 33 and 34. I wanted to use an example of something that Outward Bound Peace Building did with the Southern Arizona Rotary District in terms of in-person and or hybrid models being able to be more customized to local needs and concerns. When we worked with the Southern Arizona Rotary District, they wanted to focus on their role as a border state and issues of immigration and how that impacts their communities in various different ways. We were able to do a really interesting session with local NGOs, government agencies, and faith-based organizations that looked at the different ways in which the community provides services for, manages, and deals with the issues that are specific to them as a border state. And it became a really interesting place to build ideas for partnerships between Rotary and these community organizations. So that is something that with a more customized in-person event is possible to do. Of course, as we move into hybrid and full virtual ones, it is a little harder to be that localized. However, we're all getting better at it. And I think that all of you have now probably had a lot of Zooming experience. And so we're working hard to think about how do we do something that's more virtual, that allows us to scale it much bigger, but also gives opportunities for Rotary clubs and districts then to think about the specific needs of their communities within peace building and peace education. All right, with that, we would love to hear, I forgot, we had one more slide. Well, this is a critical slide, of course, which is the roles and responsibilities. So for ourselves, we see this as the implementing partners, that we are really about designing and developing and delivering the content for the training events, for the certification, for the curriculum, and even those connections with book lists, peace education book lists for peace in the homes. We see ourselves producing and distributing a toolkit. I saw that the Meals Challenge also had a toolkit in support of local and district Rotarians, and to work together to secure partner funds for tech infrastructure and to promote the stories of local and the zone's Rotary involvement. As Rotarians, we are asking you to take the lead as conveners and logistical support for at least one training event of 100 stakeholders, to promote the Peace Builder certification with the groups that you're connected to already, to achieve at least one virtual training for 200 students and 10 interactor service clubs, or to use this as an opportunity to share these ideas with youth-based groups and schools in your community, and to outreach to secure local Rotarian and partner funding. So with that, I hope it's a little clear what exactly the proposal is, as well as what the role, potential role of Rotarians is. And so we'd like to move forward with a first round of feedback and ask you to consider the question about what excites you the most about what you have heard, and what do you see as challenges? Now, I'm gonna go ahead and ask, because I can see on my screen, Mary, would you be willing to get us started? You're the first one on my screen.
Sure, you didn't give me a lot of time to think about it, though.
Sorry.
I'm excited about this. And I appreciate the slides you just put up that really laid out what I might be responsible for as a district governor in doing this. I think for our district, we can certainly do these things. I'm excited. I thought of one potential association or avenue that would have some similar interest would be the local and statewide community leadership programs. They are very focused on DEI generally, as well as conflict resolution, therefore peacekeeping. So that is one area that I think might be worth exploring as an avenue to move into this, because they already do training for groups and classes, cohorts, or whatever. So that might be an option. I like the book outreach piece specifically for those local group, small rural clubs that are not going to have the density of population to meet some of those training ideas, or large enough high schools to really get some scale from. So I think the reading books, and I love that it starts at, you know, a very young age, would be a great long-term focus for us.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you going directly into thinking about who might be great partners. That is just wonderful. Who's ready? Hugh, I see you on my, on my list next. Sorry to pick on you, but maybe it's just easier.
Well, I'm obviously been thinking a lot about what you've been saying this morning. Before we got started, I had actually been thinking about, well, could we be doing something with the colleges in our zone? I'll widen it to that, but I was thinking about in both Maryland and Delaware, 7620 and 7630, our two districts, particularly since I have some very close connections with some of the leadership of the colleges. But I'm not seeing that as where we're focusing. So given that we are kind of a rural area with a lot of small clubs, I'm going to have to be focusing more, I think, on what we can do with their Interact clubs, and the fact that we are also trying to increase the number of Rotaract clubs in our area, and that could be a focus for this. I love the reading thing. I have grandchildren. We have Imagination Library in our community, and our club was one of its original sponsors. So those are things. And Peter's right across the bay, so I know I've got to straighten up and do something.
That's wonderful. I went to high school in Delaware, so I feel strongly about your district, and that's wonderful. Steve, you're up.
Hi, good morning. How are y'all?
Very good, thank you.
Well, we're in Georgia. I'm excited about this. In fact, next month on the 21st of September, we're doing a multi-district statewide event for a peace initiative. So we're really, really excited about that. We too are very plugged into the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, really believe in that passionately. We're also engaging a lot of our Rotaractors in all of our district committees, frankly. So this ties in beautifully, and they're very excited about getting engaged with this as well.
That's wonderful. That's really exciting. Thank you so much. Jan, you are next on my list.
Well, I'm very excited about this opportunity, and it's really great to see some of the pieces of the structure that you all have developed. And I love, one of the things I really like the best is putting Rotarians in the role of conveners within the community, because that's really what we should be doing in so many of our issues. And I think this gives us something to wrap our arms around and really, you know, utilize the talents and the skills that we have in Rotary. So I think that's great. I think a byproduct of this is that it will really help to put a face on the Peace Fellow program. I think it's a great program, but for many of our districts, it's an abstract concept that once in a while we have somebody that goes into that program, but this will kind of show the fruition of it. So I think that's really great. A couple of not really concerns, because I'm sure we have ways of working these out, but the age-old, how do we separate politics and peace, or can we? We all, I'm sure most of us represent areas where we have very, very divergent views, and I think we need to be very careful about the way that we approach it and keep it issue focused, and in a way that youth and children of all ages can really understand without running the risk of being a political organization type thing. Another concern I have is that with the many demands on the schools, how do we effectively get into the schools to get into their curriculum, because I think that was the largest piece with 75,000 high school students, and that's through through utilizing the curriculum and getting the teachers on board. And of course, before that, the administrators and school superintendents and school boards and that sort of thing. Many of us have superintendents and school board members in our clubs, so that should help it. But I think we may need to, work on, building that piece. And I also think that through the service clubs, I think if we're successful in selling this to our Interact clubs as being leaders, I think it gives them a real focus to work on and makes them stand out perhaps from some of the other service clubs. And so let's see. I think those were the major comments that I had. So I think it's just an awesome opportunity. I'll use Mike's word. He uses super all the time. I think it's a super opportunity for all of us. I'm really excited. So
thank you very much. And we do appreciate hearing the challenges from you as well. That's really critical to where we are right now in developing the proposal. All right, Mike, I think I think Jan put it right over to you.
Well, I think that's Mike Vernon, actually.
Oh, okay.
yeah, it was Mike Vernon. Sorry.
Sorry.
It had to be you,
Oh,
Mike.
Mike.
You're welcome.
You're the
to go
only
ahead
super
first, Mike.
around, buddy.
Super Mike.
Who do you want? Who do you want to go? Anna? What,
You're up.
what,
You're
super
up,
Mike or me,
You're up,
Mike?
Michael Vernon, you're up.
All right. Thanks. This is all new to me. Certainly, I'm learning and listening and trying to develop some ideas. The first inkling was when we had to send out and get to read actions and read what's going on. So I'm playing a degree of catch up here. And, I agree with Jan. There's some items we have to look at. And I think the separation of politics and peace is at the tippy top, particularly for the next few months. We're concerned here about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so somehow we've got to work through those and not be seen as being political or pushing any kind of a political agenda, because whatever position you take, it's going to be wrong. So we just got to be careful. Jan also made a good point about schools and curricula. We've had in our little 5 counties a program for anti-bullying, and we've tried to get that into schools, and it's been tough because each school district we have is a little different and has their own concerns. And of course, anti-bullying could go along with this and help that out. So we just got to think through those, how to do that. One of the areas we're trying to get into this year is in areas that are underserved. And I think this program has a lot to offer there. I think it has a lot to offer both as adults and as younger people in that area. Valencia College here has a peace program that's fairly robust. Carrie Williams, our peace scholar, has participated in that, and we go to her a lot to answer some questions. Another area for us that might be an interesting lead is there's a very large movement for a Holocaust museum in Orlando. There is one in Maitland now, and that's moving to a larger area downtown that's going to expand considerably. We have had some discussions about diversity, equity, and inclusion with folks there. That may be a nice avenue to explore as we look forward to doing those things. And certainly I agree with Steve. Once again, I guess, I follow Mike Walker around and just try to pick up the nuggets of brightness that he drops. And, I just picked up a nugget from Steve of the Imagination Library. In fact, Thursday, we've got the director that's going to address one of our clubs. We've invited everybody in the district to listen in, because what better way to support children than a book a month that magically appears for extraordinarily small amount of money. But that's an area that as a district, we have 1 or 2 clubs. We've just got to get better. And so I'm excited that there's that connection. Rotaractors, I had a discussion with our district Rotaract chair just last night. And this is one of the things, I sent him the information today from today's meeting and also to our youth services chair. And one individual that when Peter spoke to us at our Vibrant Club workshop a couple of weeks ago, sent me an email within an hour of Peter's talk and said, I want to be included. I want our schools to be included. I want our Interact Club to be included. So, you know, we've got the nucleus of a little task force forming. And Rotaractors, I think, have a big part of that because, you know, we found that Interactors certainly don't necessarily want to hear from Rotarians. They want to hear from peers and they want to hear from Rotaractors and they want to hear from people who are more their own age. So I think there's a lot there. So I'm glad you recorded this. Not only is many things in life are unstable, but my internet says it's unstable today. Walker once again says that's because I'm not a premium user, but I'm glad you recorded this so I can catch up on those things that I missed. So thank you very much, and thanks for including us.
Thank you so much. And yes, we will make the recording available to everyone. And that was a lot of great stuff to hear and exciting news that there has been some movement already. So thank you for that. So we will go back now to Mike Walker, please.
Awesome. Well, I want to be like Mike Vernon when I grow up. And Mike and I have a lot in common. I grew up where he is now, and we're both married to a Susan. So but he is among our 31 district governor. He is known as Mike 1, and I am Mike 2. So a couple of thoughts. One was, so we're working hard on revitalizing Rotaract in our district, and we're a little embarrassed that we're the birthplace of Rotaract 52 years ago, and we have 8. I'd say we have 2, 3, 4 strong clubs and as many weak clubs, and we're working very hard and putting an extra amount of effort in that. And so one of the things that we did was to ask Rotaractors what they're looking for, and you could sum it up in 3 areas. One is service, but Rotary is not remotely unique on a college campus or even a high school campus in that regard. Second is leadership development. We could do a far better job with leadership development in the high school and college level than we do. And we are actually doing that with Interact. We have Interact leadership workshops. And then finally, what Rotary offers that nobody else does to Rotaractors and Interactors, no other campus organization, and that's connections to Rotarians. And so we're working on, in the early stages of I would call it I haven't really figured out the right name for it, but career connector, and to have Rotarians that volunteer maybe an hour a month on a Zoom call to connect with Rotaractors and really have a value proposition for people to want to join Rotaract. And so to me, what we're talking about here today would be part of that value proposition for people to become involved with Rotaract and to want to be connected to Rotary. And so I think that's an important part of this whole issue. One quick question that I had was on the materials that have been discussed. How much of that, and maybe I have to, one more before my question, I have to say that I'm in Patricia's district, and I was club president when Patricia started New Gen Peace Builders back in 2013, and the district governor that year lives about 200 feet from me, so I'm very, very familiar with it right from the very beginning, and a big, big supporter of it, and amazed at all that Patricia has done. Watched her over the last 7 years, and this is truly a unique program. But my question is, how much of the materials like books and things that we're talking about with peace education are created by New Gen Peace Builders or Outward Bound versus outside those 2 organizations?
Okay, that's really great. And wait, actually, Patricia, we have
Sorry, I mean,
one more person to listen to. So Andy, are you gonna, we'll come back to a little bit of the questions after this, but Andy, we'd like to hear from you and just make sure we heard from everyone. And you're gonna conclude this round of feedback.
there you go.
Hey, it's good to see everybody. You know, I think if we went out and asked the average Rotarian to build on a point that Jan really made, there's a huge amount of mystery and lack of understanding to what happens with our peace program. You know, we send out the peace fellows, and, you know, so I get that Nextdoor app, and every once in a while they get a picture of a bobcat walking over, and the whole neighborhood gets excited because they have a sighting of a bobcat. You know, we get excited like that when we see a peace fellow. But I think the perception that we've got especially in America right here, is why would we need peace here? Because the perception is all these peace fellows are out there fighting in war zones trying to get peace. Obviously, what's happening in our own community right now it's horrible, and all of ours, right? I doubt if we've got one of our own communities that we don't have some type of conflict going on, and certainly in a weekly or daily basis out there. So I believe this program is going to be very, very important and interesting to see how our Rotarians can unveil their eyes and get a different paradigm shift of really what this peace program is. Because I think the perception for most Rotarians, and maybe I'm wrong, is the peace fellows are out other places, not here. When we need that work is here as much as anywhere else. So I'm interested. I'm excited about this. I think it can do great things. The breadth and impact that we can have all over the place, especially in our own backyards, is going to be very interesting. That's what I love most about this plan that's starting to come together.
Thank you so much, Andy. Much appreciated. Okay, I think that I got everyone. Let me know if I did not, and I'll hand it back over to Patricia. Thanks very much for your time and careful remarks.
Yeah, and so can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you for all of that richness. It was really energetic. It was really rich because you might have seen me trying to cut in. It wasn't to not allow the last speaker to speak. It was to say that because of the richness of this, we may have very little time if we're going to stay on time for the second round of questions. So I'm just sort of saying that out loud to Anna and all of us so we can think about that. Before we do this timeline, a couple things. You have said some really interesting things like Rotaractors. Just so you know, what we're talking about here in terms of the Peace Builder certification, there's a global grant in play for us to do that with zones 3031 Rotaractors already. And one of the things that we have already said is, hey, zones 33, 34, you should know more about this. So there is starting to be some exchange between zones 33, 34 and the Rotarian and Positive Peace Activator, who is leading that global grant to do what we're talking about here with Rotaractors in 3031. Two is, I think the point, it was really interesting to hear the question from Mike. So what I'd like to say to everybody is the signature project, part of the fundamental underpinning is that it's road tested. That is why Peter has invited Outward Bound Peace Building and New Gen Peace Builders in to be implementing partners with this project, because we're Rotary Peace Fellows, but we're also organizations that are road tested over years. And you always ask such great questions. One of them is, well, how do you bring this into school systems? It seems really hard. Like, we've tried to get a bullying program in school systems and met with obstacles sometimes. Again, road tested. So we now have a 8-year history of being able to successfully bring this programming to service clubs and schools in Texas, Virginia, North Carolina, California, and about to be Alabama. We have a big project going into Alabama. And obviously the work that Anna has been doing for years with Outward Bound and in her other Rotary Peace Fellows endeavors, training events that are road tested. So to answer Mike's question, it's exactly for those reasons that Peter has brought us in to support the signature project going forward. The one other thing I'd like to say that really stood out in your questions is how you were beginning to think about the differences or the different ways to leverage this project in Delaware versus Georgia versus Florida. And just a fine point on that, Florida and Central Florida are really interesting. When you map Florida, Florida has more high schools than any other state in the zones, among the top 3 in the United States. Jacksonville, Central Florida, including Orlando and Miami-Dade are different animals, so to speak, and they all have a part to play in this ginormous opportunity called Florida. But the stories from Georgia are very interesting too. And when you, the fact that you're having this multi-dimensional peace initiative in September, that's part of the Georgia story. And then Delaware is surprisingly interesting. It's not very big, but actually in Delaware at the beginning of this year, the House passed a bill that teachers are going to have to become more responsible for teaching Holocaust, anti-oppression, social justice issues, and so on. And in fact, Delaware, the University of Delaware reached out to us and said, could what you're up to be a foundation for the University of Delaware helping spread peace education to high schools? So all of these are very interesting in the way that you're approaching this as a collective, but with unique stories to tell in each state is tremendous in terms of your leadership. Okay, so timeline, just a reminder that all good things need a good plan and timeline alongside them. And we are currently in the May through October planning and listening phase with you. A big date on the calendar is the November Zones 33-34 virtual summit. We say Pittsburgh because it's associated with Stephanie and the year that she and Peter share, but it would have been in Pittsburgh if there was going to be a physical event. And that's a point in time when Peter would really like to speak with confidence about what the districts or district governors are doing in terms of embracing the program and willing to sign up for. So that's an important date. Notice January to June says conduct funded pilots. They're really not pilots. They're really not pilots because it's road tested. But just want you to know that some of the things that we're talking about are in play in terms of, for instance, the digital certification in these states that I just mentioned during this spring part of 2021. So Texas, Virginia, North Carolina, California, and the Caribbean. District 7030 has already been working hard on how to fund this program in full bloom in its district this spring, including the training event, the books program, and the Peace Builder certification with Interact clubs in particular. And that district is interesting. There are 17 countries in it. Another important date, next September, would be the official kickoff aligned with the summit in Naples, but also International Peace Day, which takes place every year in September on the 21st. So that's the big voice, big wow. And then you can see how the program continues through the end of 2022. Although I hesitate to use the word end because the whole idea is like the polio initiative that started 30 years ago, which Rotary has contributed $1.8 billion to. You start and you make a big impact in the beginning, and the assumption is zones 33-34 would be a model for itself and a model for others. So, but that is how the timeline lays out. Could I have the next slide, please? So to that point, everybody always wants to know dollars. And I have the distinct pleasure of being the voice of what this means in terms of cost implications. Now, Anna showed you a little bit what happens with scale in the training events. So if a district comes and says, we'd like to do a training event, okay? It's about 3 times the cost of doing it if multiple districts say, we understand the value of those training events. And so she showed you some numbers up front. And so scale is important. You can see, we're trying to sort of demonstrate the power of doing things at scale. So for instance, Shelterbox, which Anna mentioned, which started in Rotary and has been spun off, serves about 210,000 people a year at about $81 a person, okay? and those are refugees in particular. There's a project now on the hand wash site. There are many projects on that site. It's amazing. But one of them in the Dominican Republic proposes an $800,000 project to serve 97 schools, which means, you know, touching, so to speak, 41,000 people, or just over 41,000 people. So remember that slide at the beginning where we said over time, you could get to offering peace education to an individual for about the cost of a cup of coffee? That truly, truly is possible. You're seeing a number at the bottom of this slide that says $3 million. And so I am a Rotarian. If I were a Rotarian, I'd say, uh-oh, are you asking us to be on the hook for $3 million? No. What we're showing you is the vision of what we've just talked about, including the infrastructure, the architecture, running this program for well over a year, you know, because it would really be 15 months, getting to 100,000 young people, and setting it up so that the program is that much more infinitely scalable is a $3 million vision. But the point I made at the beginning of the conversation was a notable portion of that is infrastructure, which other funders are interested in supporting if Rotary is interested in being the conveners and voice and so on at the local level. We could go into that in more detail in another conversation. For the purpose of this morning, we just wanted to give you initial impressions so that we're all kind of on the same page. Next slide, please. But of course, there's always the question of next steps. So first of all, we have to thank you because you were actively involved in this discussion this morning, and we were all taking notes. The call is recorded, as you mentioned. And so that's all going to be input for our conversation with Peter. But after this call, you'll receive a very brief online survey where you can even give us more feedback. So it would be great if you would do that. We are actively seeking what we would refer to as a steering team and champions. So there may be a core group, amongst your set of representatives for the zones who would be really interested in working closely with us on the finer details of the program as we go forward. And so we, want to tee that up. And then here's kind of the elephant in the room, okay? So the elephant in the room is we said to reach 100,000 young people initially in the first year, we want interactors to be a core element of that. But interactors alone will not get us or you to scale engagement with young people. And so we said, could we be agnostic so that we engage interactors but are also willing to serve other service clubs? But as Mike would know in Charlotte very well, just mapping where Rotary has interactors and active interact clubs is challenging. There are gaps in the information, and the gaps are more pronounced because in districts where there are really strong interact systems, the Rotary advisors can tell us a lot about where the interactors are and which clubs are strong and where they're not. In districts where interact doesn't have quite that presence, or there are gaps, we're more likely to have inaccurate numbers. So one of the things we'll be asking you to do is, to the extent that you're available, you're able, give us a picture of Rotaractors in your area. Give us a picture of interactors in your area, because that mapping is part of the potential for success for the program. And then last but not least, to meet that deadline or that timeline that we've been talking about, Peter asked us to very carefully lay out, well, what kinds of things need to be done to set the program on solid footing so that it can be successful in 2021, 22. And one of the lessons from the 10 Million Meals Challenge is you have to do a lot of structural upfront work of the program and promote it very effectively. So in preparing for the November summit and the end of the year, we've laid out steps, including production of promotional materials, organizing for the summit itself, key research and design elements to define the plan for the zone. And the number that we have been asked to present to you today by Peter is $60,000. one of the things he's speculated or wondered about, is given where we are in the Rotary year, you know, are there any DDF funds out there, or what other ideas do you have about how that might be supported? And so he's leaving us with a question mark around that. That being said, that's kind of a summary of next steps. And I think we won't have a lot of time for the next round of questions, but I do want to bounce it back over to Anna.
So I understand that somebody had a great clock there that chimed 10 o'clock, so we know we're a little over. But so feel free to leave the call if you have another Zoom coming up or an important engagement. But if you do have a moment to give us final impressions and thoughts, especially related to the timeline and the budgets and the planning budget that were just presented to you, we'd be very, very grateful, and sorry for going a little bit over. This is a bigger group than we had in the first, but we are very excited to hear from you. So I won't call people out. I'll just let you unmute yourself if you're interested in offering some final impressions. And thank you so much, Patricia, for an absolutely fabulous overview.
Well, I personally think this is a wonderful program. The challenges that we're all facing in our own club areas and district areas right now are certainly taxing all of the funds that we've been able to raise or are trying to raise on one level. Two, the demands of trying to retain and grow membership are another factor that's coming into play. So in terms of where we might find money, I think that's going to be something that our governor chain in our district are going to have a bigger conversation about because of just what limitations we have. But I think it gives a great focus for Rotary to come back on and be able to have impacts in our community in a positive way. And the way schools are opening virtually, I know our Interact clubs are going to be very, very difficult to try and gather together and get some focus and some involvement on them. And the same with a number of our Rotaract. So those are just thoughts.
No, that's very, very helpful. The more specific, the better. Anyone else?
You know, I think if we can put together, because it sounds like we want some events on there, and we've got a start of a structure or a template of what they look like. That's where the economies of scale will really help us if we don't have to start from scratch to define from a white sheet of paper what that event looks like, how is it run, what are the resources. I imagine people on this call know where the Peace Fellows are that may be able to pitch in our local area, make those contacts available, add those to our committee teams, which are probably going to be doing on Zoom. So it's easy to take somebody from your team, embed them into our local team here, have knowledge transfer, and help us build real effective programs in our local district. I think if that would help me tremendously, and I bet the other governors on the call tremendously, if we get a real nice playbook to say, here's how to do it. You don't have to follow it that way, but it helps you start.
Definitely the playbook or toolkit is very much what we see as part of our responsibility. And I do really like that idea of using this opportunity to connect with Peace Fellows in your district. And both Patricia and I know that group well. So who else can offer us some final feedback? Anyone else on here? Mary?
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna, you talked about, you know, not limiting to just Rotary's Rotaract. So what are the options for partnering with Kiwanis and Exchange Club? And, you know, do they have I know they have their own focus areas too, but youth is one of them. So has that been explored at all?
That's a super interesting idea. And definitely, I think someone on the chat also put boys and girls clubs. You know, I think there are a lot of opportunities out there that would also help, I think, Rotaract and Interact initiatives if they understand youth and get an opportunity to understand some of the opportunities available through the Rotary Youth Association. So all of these ideas are very good. Mike, you looked like you were reaching for your mic.
Well, if you're talking about mic 2 and not mic 1, then I think certainly it's a very timely subject, and I know Peter has had this in mind for a long time, but I think there will definitely be a lot of interest, and we certainly don't want to market it as something that is in response to what's going on in the last few months, but I think that is a reality of what's taking place, and people have a greater interest in finding a way to talk to each other and resolve differences in a peaceful manner instead of conflict being the first way, or arguing being the first way. To teach them specific tools of alternative ways to engage with people they disagree with.
That's great. And that would definitely be the focus, is on these tools, very much on these tools of how we come together. Anyone else? I see Steve and Jan are both on the call, which makes me think they might still have something to say to us.
We're all in. We're ready to go.
All right. That's fantastic. Jan?
Just a quick question. You threw out the number $60,000. Now, kind of define the terms. What is that, like a per district, or is that, I must have zoned out. I didn't get quite what that related to.
So that is an overall for both organizations planning grant. So that would just be a one budget to cover the time, the infrastructure, the presentations, the marketing, and the infrastructure that we'd like to put in to really start the program going in January. So that is basically gets us through this planning period. Tricia, is that fair enough, or you want to add something to that answer?
No, it is. And so it's not, it's assumed it's across the zones, or to serve the vastness of the zones. Yeah. And
Yeah.
as Anna said, to get the program up and running so that it's not suddenly July 2021 and we all go, uh-oh. Yeah. And more detail can be provided on that. We just wanted to do highlights in these 1 hour discussion groups.
1 hour and a bit. Any last, we're so grateful for your time, and I realize we've gone over, so I don't want to push anymore, but if anyone wants to follow up, and we also do have the survey going out right away, which will give you a chance for some individual responses and specific ideas, please. We're really in this moment right now. That's why we wanted to talk to you, to get these ideas, to get these, and of course the concerns and challenges you see, but really what would make it possible for your district, for your club to be a part of this project. That's what we're really interested in this moment, why we're still planning. So
a quick question, Anna, and I can't remember the timeline. You did a great job on you and Patricia putting the timeline out there. If we start formulating a team now, one who could be a resource to inject in that team to start, or what should be our next steps? How quick should we start really thinking about formulating our team?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Our next steps are to take the feedback from the discussion groups and insights from the recordings and the note taking that's been going on. Meet with Peter, talk about a lot of what we've heard, and then officially move to next steps. What I really appreciate is that you're already thinking, okay, who would be my working team at the district, local level? How do I get involved? How could we be champions and partners? Let's just say that we'll go back to Peter, and then we want to be coming out with clear guidance with and through him, lickety split, as they say.
Yeah. Although, Andy, we're writing down your name. So did you see that champions? Did you see that champions committee?
I don't know about that. I'm not a very smart guy. So, but initially I'm thinking I'd want to have 3 events in my district.
Wow.
Because of when I've got the whole southwest of Florida. So I have Naples to the south, which the summit will be in my district that year when I'm governor, which we may want to think about how we use the local resources to augment that event around this. So I better not screw it up in my district because I won't have a good showing to bring anybody local there. But the locality, you know, it's from Sarasota in the north, it's about a 2-hour drive to the south. So traditionally we do a southern event in the middle and then in the north in there to split that up a little bit so I get deeper engagement with the local people. The conversations are different on that. That's my initial, but I want one committee to ride over all 3 of those events, which I need at least one person from your team to be augmented on that committee so it stays in line with our practices, because the DGEs are already kind of feeling the pressure coming in. We're not going to be able to get our hands really deep into it. We can set the leadership tone and pace and be engaged in that, but we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, so just in closing, I love what you just did, because you're thinking on behalf of your district and you're saying, oh, in my district, I can already see I want 3 events. It would be easy to fall into a pattern of saying, oh, is every district supposed to have 1 event? Not necessarily, okay? Some might have 0, but we definitely are looking for the scale to get at least 21 events. And so you say, I can see my district might be 3. So that's great. Let's say this. We know that we have to be interacting with folks at the local level, like you and your steering team, by essentially the beginning of September, because what Peter's aiming for is that by the time the November summit comes, the excitement and the plan is being articulated versus it's a kickoff for people to go into planning mode. So I would say we'll go back to Peter, and the next steps and how to engage back and forth will be clear, crystal clear over the next 30 days. The more feedback you can give us, whether it's by email or follow-up discussions we'll have, the better, because it's like putting a puzzle together, right? And each piece of the puzzle has to say, okay, here's what I'm seeing and thinking about. So thank you for articulating that in that way so quickly.
So do you have the bandwidth on your team? Because you've got 31 districts in here, which I think you could probably juggle a zone meeting. If I pull my team together in the next 2 or 3 months and everybody else on this call and do an initial district only, or we could probably put a cluster of districts together to say, here's how to get the juices flowing. Here's the team, because I already have 3 people in my mind I probably can call and tap for this to have the initial leadership core on this. But do you have the bandwidth to hop on those Zoom meetings?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so we've committed that by signing up to support this signature project for Peter, we have the bandwidth to support the signature project in a well-organized way. And yes, by the way, it's not just Flavio and Anna and Elizabeth and me behind the scenes. There are others behind the scenes too. But so yes, our intention is that we be able to be effective implementing partners with a variety of districts that would step up to do this.
Okay, all right. I'll try not to overdraw the bank account, but get ready.
All right. So again,
by the way,
your input was amazing.
That's
so
super,
rich.
super exciting, Andy. I can't wait to be on that call and do that brainstorming with you and others.
Have you ever met Kathy Fay?
No.
You look just like her. She's the past district governor, I think, from Illinois. The dynamic lady. Her father passed away, and during her speech, she shows a picture of her in her tractor plowing, and it's not a small tractor. It's like a tractor that plows wheat fields, right? And her and her brother are trying to keep the thing. What else does she do, Jan?
She's from Iowa.
Iowa, that's it.
Yeah, she's an Iowa farmer, and she's one of the movers and shakers behind hand wash in Haiti.
Oh,
Okay. And you do look just like her.
that's funny.
I thought you were
Well,
Kathy.
I'm a farm girl from Virginia, so when I meet her, we'll have lots to say, talk to each other about. Thank you guys so much for your time, for your comments, for your questions. This has been incredibly helpful. I'm sorry we went over, but we're really excited about this project. We hope you understand our enthusiasm, and we're really grateful for yours. And we will follow up with the survey and the materials that Patricia talked about, and we'll be in touch very soon. We really look forward to working with you all on these ideas. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, take care.
Take
Thanks for
care.
your partnership.
Take care.
Bye.
Be careful.